members of the judiciary, fellow attorneys, family members, and guests. I'm here to speak about my partner and friend, William Henry Wagner, a Hoosier from Kendallville, Indiana. Bill was a friend and a partner that anyone would have been pleased to know. Many of you have watched the late night host Stephen Colbert, and he has an interesting history. He's had some tragedies in his life. When he was 10, he lost his father and two brothers. And Stephen has on his desk a plaque, and I think this plaque expresses the life of Bill Wagner about as well as anything I could think of. And the plaque says, "Joy is the most infallible sign that God exists." Joy was the most important part of Bill Wagner's life, and faith was equally important. Bill was a husband, father, grandfather, lawyer, friend, and mentor who found time to not only be active in his profession and his community, but time with his family and friends. And all of those times, there was joy involved. Bill met his wife Betty at Valparaiso University. They were married in 1956 while Bill was attending law school. Bill graduated from Valparaiso Law School in 1958 and was admitted to the Indiana bar. But his first job was with Frankenmuth Mutual Insurance Company in Frankenmuth, Michigan, so he became a member of the Michigan bar in 1959. But Bill yearned for Valparaiso, and he came back and joined the law firm of Chester, Clifford, Hepner, and Horan. Those of you who are old enough know that that was the predecessor to Hepner, Wagner, and Evans that was formed on September 20th of 1976. Bill and Betty, and I'll tell you, Betty was probably one of the sweetest, kindest people I've ever known. And they had 4 children. And of course, with names like Bill and Betty, their children all had names that started with B's. Brent, the oldest, Bretta, Brad, and Brenda. And of those 4 children, they produced 15 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. Bill was, as I said, Bill had faith was a strong component of his life. He was active in the Emmanuel Lutheran Church all of his life in Valparaiso, and as was Betty. But Bill loved his chosen profession, the law. And he spoke in terms of that. One time, Bill lectured me, and he said, "You know, John," and this is when he'd been practicing about 40 years, "the law is a jealous mistress." I thought, well, this is kind of a dangerous thing to say. But that's the way Bill viewed it. And Bill primarily practiced in real estate and zoning. And those of you who have practiced in front of zoning boards, unlike this court, where there are rules of evidence, there's a judge, you got a fighting chance. These zoning boards are all lay people, and your success often depends by your ability to deal with people that have varying backgrounds and they have their own opinions, and they really aren't concerned about the rules of evidence. Bill was probably the most outstanding attorney I know of in the zoning area. And Bill would take some zoning situation, for example, a junkyard, and he would call it a metals compaction compound, something that every community needed. And Bill was successful in that regard. There was a poor young man who started a fruit stand in Porter County and had failed to comply with a few of the zoning regulations. And Bill represented him, and Bill went before the zoning board, and he says, my client operates an impulse buying center. Well, he again was successful. One of the first cases I worked on was a zoning case that Bill had, and Bill had a passion for the law. I've heard a number of people talk about the passion that attorneys have, and Bill certainly had that passion. And this particular case was a family that had built a garage that just happened to be a foot over the setback lines, and they had a very ununderstanding neighbor who pursued the local building commissioner to require that that garage be torn down because of this violation. So Bill goes before the BZA, and he explains the situation, and he gets a variance for this couple. This is back in 1970 or 71, and the neighbor appealed to the circuit court judge, who reversed the BZA and took away the variance. Well, Bill was confronted with how to deal with this problem, so he dealt with it by waiting. And 6 months went by. He went back to the BZA, and Bill was successful again in getting a variance. Well, this time the appeal went to the circuit court judge, who was not happy about the fact that the BZA had just done the same thing that he had told them was wrong in the first place. And the judge pointed out the doctrine, as the lawyers will be familiar with, the res judicata. That is, the case has already been decided, you can't come back and have a second bite at the apple. Well, this time Bill appealed, and the Court of Appeals said, we agree with you, Mr. Wagner, that if they're going to raise res judicata, you have to do it before the BZA, and they didn't do that, and so the circuit court judge was reversed, who many of you may know was the Honorable Alfred Provarnik, who later was on the Indiana Supreme Court. That was the tenacity and the passion that Bill had for what seemed like a minor thing. And the only time I can remember Bill actually trying a case to a jury was, again, back in the early 70s, when a gentleman who was in his mid-70s who had transferred his house to a couple and retained a life estate. Well, they evicted him. And so Bill was incensed about this, and he brought a wrongful eviction action. And he tried a jury case, and he got a $14,000 recovery for this gentleman for the wrongful eviction. But back in those days, as Clyde will be able to tell you, that was a lot of money. So that was the type of passion that Bill had in the practice of law, but even more so in his community. Bill served his community in many, many ways, and among those were being a member of Kiwanis for most of his career. And Bill was honored by Kiwanis And in addition, Bill was honored by as one of the, this was in 1998, one of the 100 most influential people in Indiana. And so Bill also was very active in the Chamber of Commerce and many projects for the Chamber. And as I was mentioning with Kiwanis, he was voted the Outstanding Citizenship Award and the Legion of Honor. These are very, very highly sought awards in that area. And when Bill, and I can't give you the date because it was like so many things in the practice of law, it was a moving target, but after Bill retired, he became involved in Habitat for Humanity and other civic activities. So his service continued, and fortunately his health was pretty good. But more than just his passion for law, Bill was a guy that loved adventure and knew things that he could do. And Bill was always positive and fun around the office. I just can't remember Bill having a bad day. And so one of the things that Bill would do is host a gathering in the summer for the whole firm, and it was a hog roast. Now, today, actually, you might think, well, we'll hire somebody and bring in a roasted hog. Not Bill. That would be too simple. He constructed with concrete blocks, a pit, and had constructed a metal lid that was open on either ends with handles. And he would roast the hog for 12 hours. So the night duty was the toughest because you had to manually turn that hog all night long, every 15 minutes. But this is the way Bill approached these adventures, and the whole firm and all the kids had a wonderful time because of Bill's ingenuity and willingness to put in the hard work. He was a guy that loved to hunt for the morel mushroom. Those of you who are mushroom hunters up in Michigan, he never revealed places that he went because it's a closely guarded secret. But Bill was a winemaker. But I think the thing that was most helpful to me as a young attorney in the community, he introduced me to a lot of other people in the community. He was in an investment club, and he brought me into the investment club, which gave me a lot of contacts in the community I never would have had. Probably one of Bill's favorite avocations was being a Cub fan. And unfortunately, during most of his career, the Cubs did not do well. But that didn't stop his passion for the Cubs. And I went to many a Cub game, and they always ended after the game. We'd go over to Murphy's bleachers for an opportunity to kind of relax and commiserate the outcome. And Bill, one of the most interesting things Bill did is he was in his middle 60s, and you may or may not have heard of this particular event in the state of Iowa. It's called RAGBRAI, and it stands for Register's Annual Great Bicycle Ride Across Iowa. And it was started back in 1973 and by a couple of writers on the Des Moines Register, and they dipped their tire into the Missouri River, ride all the way across Iowa in about 7 days, and they dipped their front tire in the Mississippi River. It's about a 460-mile ride. Well, Bill wasn't much of a bicyclist or even an athlete at he undertook that, and he went through at least 5 of those while he was in his mid-60s. This was the type of energetic, passionate guy that Bill was. And Bill, excuse me, Bill's son Brad, for reasons only Brad would know, ended up out in Wyoming. And if you've ever been through a little town called Lusk, Wyoming, you would know that the pizza place is the restaurant known for the best pizza in the state of Wyoming. And this is one of the things that Bill helped Brad plan and work on. And tragically, in October of 2013, there was a fire and the pizza place burned down. Everything was lost, and even more tragically, within 11 days later, Bill's beloved wife Betty passed away. And yet, this is where I come back to what the kind of person that Bill was and the way Bill lived his life. Because Bill devoted himself to help Brad begin to reconstruct his pizza business. And I read a newspaper from Wyoming about Brad's business, and they interviewed him, and they said, you know, this is terrible. What are you going to do, Brad? He says, well, you know, I'm excited to build something new. Well, Brad found joy in his tragedy, just as Bill had found joy in his life. And I want to thank Bill for the joy that he brought to my life and the life of so many others.